And now we continue on with the Akshi Upanishad, and there's been so much comparing and casting around with things. I know that even talking with someone just at the break has said, having to clarify where we are. So we're on sloka 21, basically, and we read on from there to 26 and 27, which is all about the third stage of yoga, according to the sun god's rendering of the 7 stages of yoga to Samkriti. That's all Akshi Upanishad. I'm comparing the whole thing to Patanjali's yoga, several thousands of years later. I mean, basically, one of the questions at the break on the phone I handled was, you're presenting all of this yoga, but it's a Vedanta class, so yoga and Vedanta are just, they're different darshanas, but they're so well connected with each other, and you probably want to connect those two back to Sankhya, because you got Kapila, Patanjali, and Vedavyas as the father of these 3 great systems. And these are the orthodox systems. Buddhism, Jainism, they would be the unorthodox that don't base their authority necessarily strictly on the Upanishads like these do. But these 3 darshanas, just so well connected, it's almost difficult to see them as different, as separate doctrines. So I think it's better to leave them connected in your mind, because, for instance, Patanjali couldn't be talking about samadhi with objects if he didn't know what the objects were according to Kapila's system, thousands of years before him. Earth, air, fire, water, ether, hearing, seeing, tasting, touching, smelling. 10 of the cosmic tattvas of the 24 right there. So those are objects, basically. I mean, maybe we don't always make that connection, but you're looking at objects, you're looking at the 5 elements. And in any object, there's more of earth in some than there is water, and in another object, there's more water than there is earth. And in every object, there's a little fire or a lot of fire. So you're just, that's one thing you kind of have to take for granted in a sense, or assume that objects aren't just separate things. They're all made of 5 constituents, and your senses are attracted to these different kinds of objects. And that's been noted by Kapila way, way back, the first man who did his homework, as far as how many elements or tattvas, no word in English again, tattvas, principles, insentient principles that come out of the sentient self for its own play and sport. And of course there's different ways of saying that the darshanas would look at them a little differently. They could be outright illusions in Advaita or Zen or Buddhism, or in Tantra they could be something to deify. Yoga, something to gain power with. So there's a little flavor difference in each of them accordingly. So basically, Samkhya gave you the cosmology. It's what I've concluded a long time ago in SRV. And then you got the practice from yoga, and then you got the philosophy from Vedanta. So cosmology, practice, and philosophy, if you want. I mean, you don't really practice Vedanta per se. It's something that you hear and you acknowledge. Or you hear it and you unacknowledge other things, you see. Like, you hear the Vedanta says, well, Brahman's the only reality, so you have to then nothing else is. Brahman's the only reality. There's 2 ways to go with that. That means Maya isn't. Or Maya is Brahman. We're just not looking at it right, you see. So there's not a lot of ways to go with the Vedanta declaration, the Vedanta Dindima, the conclusion that Vedanta gives you. And it's much the same with Buddhism. It's very cut and dried when you look at it. But as I was explaining on the phone to someone, some people feel like they need to practice, and a teacher would be a person like that. They could be a teacher of Vedanta, but they need to be able to practice yoga. Maybe other people hear Vedanta and say, that's enough for me, I got it. And maybe that's true, maybe it isn't. That's depending on the individual, yeah. But yeah, a lot of it is up there in the head with Vedanta. But if you want to really prove it, then you're going to have to, in front of people, like say, the avatars do come and prove passive bhakti or passive jnanam or passive meditation in front of people, or the path of giving up. Then you have to do some practice, and yoga would provide you with that. Any yoga would. The Patanjali's yoga is just, the refined system in its latest form, and based on a lineage, that's more recent, more current. India, 140 BC is current for India. 2,000 years ain't nothing, kind of thing. And you can see how current it is when you hear it being, the exposition of it by someone who has studied it and so forth. It's just excellent, brilliant. So I'm saying from that standpoint too, and you're obsessed with what? Twisting your body into different shapes? How about twisting your mind into these shapes? This is real beneficial for you. This will give you samadhi. It's the map to samadhi. And as I said before I left, Vedanta gives you pretty much two, savikalpa and nirvikalpa. But Patanjali's come along here and said, well, along the way, there's a samadhi of outer objects, there's a samadhi of inner objects, there's a samadhi where, as Patanjali says here, when it's experienced, when you know them both, it gives you sattvic joy, because you're not those. I mean, that kind of goes unsaid. To study a thing means you don't fear it anymore, because you know it. Fear only comes up when you don't know a thing. As soon as you know it, that fear goes away. So you have to come to a consummate station of knowing everything. Air, earth, fire, water, ether, and science started into doing that, you see, but it wasn't making the connections past body, matter, energy. And as far as it went, it didn't go back to thought. Psychology tried to go back to thought. But in Western psychology, it's only a couple hundred years old, so, as far as Freud and Jung are concerned, so that's not very deep either. Yoga psychology has been long-lived for millennia, and has been based on Samkhya Yoga. There's these cosmic principles that came out of, that are the emanation of the Purusha. The Purusha, the Prakriti came from Purusha. Nature comes from you. You don't come from nature. And so you see how in this day and age, how hard that is. We think we come from nature. I mean, you talk about seeds. You came from a seed. Your fathers, trees came from seeds. Grass came from seeds. Everything came from seeds. If you look at that in a certain way, yogically, then that's very illuminating to have that as your origin, especially if you do take it back to seed thoughts. In the beginning was the word. Seed thought is the greatest, seed of all, the word itself. And so all the words that come out of that, the great seers remember the imperishable Shakti because she's the goddess of the word. She's the meaning in all the sutras. She's the essence of non-duality. She's imperishable. Out of the Tantras, they're talking about Mother as the tender of all seeds. So that's Tantra too, and that's another darshana in India, that's rife with meaning and power, of a little different orientation than, but still very much focused on the non-dual in the end. They want the non-dual experience too. So Sloka 21 says, the general non-attachment is called non-attachment with objects. So two kinds of non-attachment, right? So I'm reorienting you to that. You're at the third stage of non-attachment in Samkriti's way of hearing it from the sun god. So now connect it to Sloka 21 where he says there's two kinds of non-attachment, or non-involvement with objects, he's calling it. That's where we look over to Patanjali's more current system and see here's the two kinds really fleshed out better for you at a later date. The Savitarka and Savichara. Achara means to analyze, and tarka means to look outward. So if you went through those, the tarka part of it, we saw that you're accompanied by gross thought. So your thought is on gross objects. Then you're focused on names and forms, see, and then mixed with the gunas, and then shadowed by doubt all the time. That's the condition of that samadhi. So it's not very deep, but if it's looked on as a samadhi, you can make advancement in the stages. The aim of it is to refine your concentration, and he's wanting you to use objects to do that. That's not the Vedantic way or the Buddhist way. You run away from them. You give them up out of hand, you don't have any truck with them if you're a monk and so forth. You're ripping that out by the roots kind of thing. The desires are there, so, and so forth. So Patanjali, is telling that you can use these to refine your knowledge. To know them again is to lose your fear of them. To not know them is to have them circling in cycles behind you in your life and in your future lives, just as they did in your past lives. So focusing on objects, their names, and their meanings for a fuller comprehension. So here's where, somewhere in your mind, you see, there was a thought based on a word, based on an object, based on its meaning, based on its sound. All 5 of those things come together at this stage of mind before they come out into solid earth, so to speak. Those 5 things in this is a tantric teaching, is that you're going to have sound and meaning and word and object and thought all floating, as it were, like it is in Dream Tonight. And you somehow congeal it, you see. Then you have a more cogent dream, you see. Or you come out in a waking, and then it's all, it's come solid again. 5 elements are all there, but you don't see them. Everything is you're back to the Savitarka gross stage. But if you can do this enough times, like the dissolution of the mind stream in both Buddhism and Vedanta, you give it up, you take it on, you give it up, you take it on every time you sleep, wake, or every time you meditate, then you get very versatile at this, and pretty soon it's just ho hum. Oh, there they are again. Oh, there they're not again. You see, and you don't react to them. Non-reactivity is like one of the main teachings of the Father of Yoga. You just do not react to anything positive or negative, and you just witness. That's very much probably what he also learned from the Buddha, that kind of very witness consciousness that's so prevalent in that system. The method is striving for basic knowledge to comprehend the world, the manifest deities, and the 16 visheshas. That's where we would go deeper into a yoga retreat to see the visheshas. But those are basically some of the tattvas of Samkhya, the visheshas. They're gross manifestations of things. Probably an important thing there is the deities, that these out here are actually manifested deities. You see the beauty of it because, you see, Samkriti is looking at the sun, That's the manifested deity of the sun god, whom he's repairing inside the sea. So if he saw the suns, deified them, said that's a manifestation of the sun god, where did it come from? Then he'd start meditating and find the sun god inside of him, you see. So the whole thing is kingdoms of heaven are within you, the gods are within you, the deities are within you, they're actually yours. And they're your powers. And yoga wants you to have these powers back. To gain control, again, of your prana. That would be the first power of the inferior route. To gain your mind back would be the superior route, first, before you came to earth, because they're all in your mind. But if you came here and you didn't have your mind in control, get the prana in control, you see, by the breathing. And then you can gain control again of all your tendencies, outer and inner. So you become a master of these 2 samadhis. But you don't want to stop there. And Vedavyasa is telling you, you'll get bliss out of that. Don't stop there, see, because now you see why the yoga has those 4 impediments to it. I mean, meditation in yoga has 4 impediments. One is tiredness, laziness, sleepiness, if you meditate, right? You know, falling out, I see that, people doing that. And 2 is restlessness. I can't, you know, restlessness of limbs, I don't know where to put them, and, you know, shifting about all the time. I can't sit quiet, breathe and sit, and then attachment and aversion come to my mind. I like some things, I don't like other things. And that's a loaded die, see, too. And then finally, enjoyment of bliss is the other obstacle. Okay. So that's where you would eventually come to have sattva in your life. So, is that here? So that's somewhere, I thought. It'll probably come up, but to have sattva is one of the things people reach for. And probably good at this time to, as we've read this, to put Patanjali's way of saying this. He says, the wisdom samadhi is of 4 levels, tended by basic thought, vitarka, by subtle thought, vichara, by sattvic bliss, ananda, and by sense of I amness, asmita. So those are 4 kinds of samadhis that you go through. And one of the brilliance of the system is that you never, even if you were a practitioner, you've heard of samadhi and you thought only Jesus or Buddha or Ramakrishna could have it. But you've been having it all the time. You're in it all the time. And again, the filter there is, you know, is if you're a worldly person, you're having pain and pleasure samadhi. Those are your companions. But if you're a practitioner, you know, you're purifying yourself, which is one of the methods of spiritual evolution, is to purify yourself, shuddhi. Then these are beginning to relate higher knowledge, lower knowledge, higher knowledge, inner knowledge, outer knowledge, and bliss to you. And so pretty soon, if you're in that long enough, you feel like samadhi is my natural state. Worldliness isn't. You see, ignorance isn't. Maya isn't. My natural state is samadhi. And then that's a strange thought for people who are thinking that nirvikalpa, I'll never attain that in 1,000 lifetimes, you know. That's why, you know, the Tibetan Buddhists say there's no nirvana there to attain. There's no samsara here to renounce. So you give up that idea of in the future post-mortem emancipation, or just call it the bliss, you know, the grace of the Lord. Call it the grace of the Lord, or my own karmas. If it's my own karmas, then I'll take to a practice and get rid of those suckers. And be myself again. Be in samadhi all the time, in some form of samadhi. Seated is okay. And of course then, so I hope that orients us a little bit to the system of 7 stages, to the 8 limbs I'm trying to bring into it, plus the sloka we're on, where he's saying the general non-attachment is non-involvement with objects. I am neither agent nor enjoyer, nor sublater nor sublated. So they're leading you towards a witness consciousness through objects, though. So if you did that, and you took that all inside, you would go into the savichara, nirvichara state, accompanied by subtle thought, focused on wisdom, and attended by inward analysis. So now, those same objects, you know, you're looking for their origins, as Samkhya would say. And that's the disconnect for people. They can't get beyond body and brain. In any system of Western knowledge, they can't get beyond body and brain. But beyond brain is mind. And those are lokas, those are bardos, those are akashas, those are the chambers of my Father's mansion. Oh, that's mind. That's this realm. You know, inner analysis. You see it every night in dream, and you know, it's the mirror image of your waking state. Waking, dreaming, you're going back and forth, and some people know that. Some people think there's only a waking state and that's all that's real, but some of the devotees know that now there's a waking dreaming going on, and dream's important, like say to the Sufis, or you know, to the shamans, that kind of thing. And then, but nobody ever, very few ever think about, deep sleep state, how blissful that is. Formlessness comes upon you, and that's what you're getting to, as you come towards the asampragyata, where no seeds will bring you back out of your inner meditation. You burned them all. At some point you burned them all, so you're not called forth against your will anymore from bliss. And there's a way of actuating that in which you can be here and not be here. You see, there's no birth, no death for me. So you're just consciousness. You're neither the sublater nor the sublated. You're neither the conditioned or the conditioner. You're just pure conscious awareness, and so the body is an add-on, and it's subtraction, add-on, subtraction. But you got to be careful, because enjoyments and non-enjoyments are both dread diseases. So attachment and aversion, the third, problem in yoga I just mentioned. So if you say, I'm giving up enjoyments, and then you go too far to the other side of non-enjoyment, then you're not getting bliss out of everything that would lead you to a ripe ego. So, you have to, it all ends up with everything is. Nothing ends up with nothing is not. It's all about everything is. Sarvosmi is the one word mantra for it in Advaita. Sarvosmi, everything is. And that's what Krishna tells Arjuna in the Gita. Be content with anything. So, or with everything. And so that's the fullness of Mahayoga. See, there is a Bhava Yoga where you have a bliss of emptiness. Those are two great paths. And souls go along them as they might, according to their natures. Yoga wants you just to have the powers to be able to do that. So if you looked at Savichara, the aim of it, to transcend the imperfections in nature and perceive the subtle essence of things. One of the reasons why you got out of the transmigratory processes is because it's happening in nature. And nature has fraught with imperfections. According to Buddha, 6 of them: birth, growth, disease, old age, decay, and death. That should be enough for you. Add in lust, anger, greed, envy, jealousy, pride, shame, fear. The 6 passions and the 8 fetters, that should be enough, or more than enough for you to know how many imperfections there are here in the body and in the brain, and that you do want to make a connection to the mind, and the pure mind particularly. So transcend the imperfections of nature to perceive the subtle essence of things. So you're on your way to that when you've mastered the outer objects. Trace them to their source, not just given them up out of, out of aversion or fear, but actually known them and then owned them. In other words, God didn't create them, and devil didn't put them there. You did that. So you study your own work. Life is a study of your own work. See, that you undertook with the materials of the 5 elements and the power of sankalpa. And now look what you wrought. You see, or you could spell out ROT at some point too. But look what you fashioned out of these, and in a conceptual way. When you see this second level, you'll want to achieve non-attachment and withdraw from objects. See, and that's the ambrosial shoot. That's the 3rd stage, which everything gets good. These slokas we're reading here are all the 3rd stage of that Samkriti is being told by the sun god. And if you look at the method by which you would do inner analysis, according to him, striving via subtle knowledge to try and comprehend the 6 avisheshas. So now you've done with the outer 5, inner 5. Now you've got these 6 powerful things to contemplate on: your ego, your thoughts, your chitta, the Mahat's coming, the great mind is coming into view. And, you know, just like the ancestors were replicas of your body on a subtle level, the Mahats, you know, the great example, you're a replica of that on the causal level. So you've got God's mind to deal with now. The Trinity, or you said the word last night at satsang, Hiranyagarbha, the cosmic egg, or Pradhana in Samkhya, Lord Brahma, you know, God's mind. You have that to deal with. When you get to that kind of meditation is where you're having a ripe ego and having unalloyed bliss. You're getting close to the most sattvic of the sattvic. That's the Trinity. And as deities, you were looking at them as manifested in form, like an actual sun, or a body of water, an ocean, or, you know, a Shiva lingam, you know, or whatever it is that's outside, that's a manifestation of something divine inside. Now you're getting to the actual sources of these things, which are the great deities, you know, and the Mahats. According to Samkhya, the Mahats, the highest of them all. It just kind of classifies them all under that one heading, the great. Mahat just means the great. But you know it's all thought by now. And that thought is leaning towards intelligence. And that intelligence is full of bliss, you see. So that's why the corn is showering bliss on them, their children are showering bliss upon them, and their studies, the scriptures are showering bliss upon them. They don't have to move an inch to get that. It's just sitting there like Sri Ramakrishna with nothing and having this bliss all the time. Come to him from within. Look at, so we can get on to the next sloka and another chart. Sananda is then where he says, and characterized by sattvic bliss. Right? So sattva is to be transcended, but along the way it's to be held above rajas and tamas, you know, because you don't want this admixture of restlessness or slothfulness to come in anymore. And so that's what's happening to most ordinary people by cycles naturally. They're under the effect of the gunas. See? But if you've taken the gunas and seen them as cosmic principles inside of yourself and you've tried to master them, then you're trying to keep a sattvic state. And people are trying to do that in their everyday life, but they're doing it, you know, via pleasure. So it's not working for them. Because pain always accompanies pleasure. And that's something that we just can't get through our noggins. You see? And pain, then you'll store up enough pain to get back to pleasure again. And depending on how advanced you are spiritually, you either see that or you don't. Vivekananda said, for the advanced spiritual soul, their karma comes back to them that day. So any act you do that's ill-considered, you'll get the karma back right away. It means you'll be able to connect it. And you know that there is such a thing as karma and that you can get out of it. But for the unillumined person who's not advanced, the karma comes weeks, months, years, lifetimes later, and they can't connect it to the act they did. So, you know, it's one of the problems of deception in Maya, the mind in Maya, as he's saying. And you're blaming on every other thing but yourself. You probably should be looking at the mind in Maya under the influence of the gunas and taking a yogic lesson and, you know, schooling yourself with it. And then just, you know, get free. So if you're in the Sananda state, the condition is accompanied by higher intelligence, focused on the subtlemost causes, and enraptured by sattvic bliss. So they mention cause finally. So, but pretty much, you know, you've got gross, subtle, and causal here, kind of the three levels of mind. This also goes with waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. Gross, subtle, and causal. Stula, Sukshma, and Sharira. They've named them in Sanskrit. So we borrowed this English words, you know, Stula is gross, and Sukshma is subtle, and Karana is causal. So you have karna it's a causal kind of thing now that you're tracing everything back for, and this gets beyond outer objects and inner objects towards deep sleep or towards formlessness, where the seeds are held in abeyance. That's the nice English way they put it. They're not watered yet, but they're sitting there waiting to be watered, and they can be watered, billions of them, by billions of souls can water those and turn into worlds. And they're all waiting back in your own consciousness. You know, it reminds me of that movie Alien, where they're walking through all those alien pods, you see. Don't even breathe on one or some horrible thing will come out. Remember that old series? Terrifying, you see. So your mind is sort of like, got all these seeds like alien pods in there. You never know which will pop out, a good one or a bad one or a mixed one, what it'll do to you. These seeds, better, I mean, it's a contention sometimes. Should I stir up the mind or should I leave it alone? The silt will come up if I stir it up, but if I don't stir it up, then I won't know my impurities. So I think the conclusion of the greatest seers is that stay witness, don't stir it up. If it comes up, then that's different. You see, somebody stirred it up or something stirred it up, either the will of the Lord or my own karmas, you see. But I shouldn't stir it up because the mind is dual by nature. It's got impurities in it that you'll never be able to get rid of. So it's misleading because when you hear, I got to purify my mind, you're doing purification of things that are bothering you, that are in your way. There are some things that are in the mind that aren't in your way, and you can move past them. Like a seed pod alien that's not going to open. You see, it's not ready to open. Or maybe it never will. It's not yours to open. So that's the benefit of doing savichara based on savitarka, is that you know the nature of things. You see, you know the nature of things to be what? Changing, ephemeral, transitory, unreal. Pick your term in any different darshana, but get the point. Back off from those and don't meddle with them. That's the mind you're talking about. And if you're going to meditate on the Mahat soon, you'll find out that the Mahat is much more pure than collective mind, which is then individual mind, is even more problematic. So your individual mind is gross, collective mind subtle, and the Mahat's causal. We borrow words for it. So they're named as they are, and the best name of all is causal. There's a cause for all this. And if you trace the cause back to matter, like we do with evolution and basically the 7-day creation theory, then you're in that cycle of only earth, only body, only brain, and you never know causal to be blissful, because your deep sleep tonight is blissful, and you got reflection from it, like in no other way except in a good meditation. You see, if you can have it. It's going to be very hard to have a good meditation unless you have analyzed every damn thing in you and gotten it out of the way. Get thee behind me, as Christ said. All the devilish things, get thee behind me, and I can then concentrate on Brahman alone. Samadhana. It's a concentration on Brahman alone where nothing else gets in. Can I have a meditation like that? Please, Mother. See? So the aim of Sananda then, if you want to go beyond it, is to concentrate on refined ego, enjoy the fount of bliss contained in the personal sense of I amness, which is coming up. Asmita means ego. Sasmita, so this is a samadhi with ripe ego. And you probably could say, if you could be so kind as to grant it to them, everyone's having samadhi of unripe ego. So they're getting enjoyments out of things. And it's turning sour on them in every case out there, because they're trying to get substance out of something that has nothing. that has no substance. It's like eating, I've often said, it's like eating cotton candy for all 3 meals of your day. You see. That's the nourishment you get out of the world. Or Sramakrishna says it's like the hog plum, you know, all pit, all seed, all skin, very little flesh, but if you eat the flesh it gives you indigestion. That's your happiness in the world, he says. So give it up right away and flee to refuge in the mother, in Brahman. Yo Brahmanan vidadati purvam, yo vai vedamscha prahinohi tasmai tanhadeva atmabuddhi prakasha mumukshurvai sharnamaham prapadye, out of the Upanishads. I go for refuge to that Supreme Brahman whose light turns the attention of mankind to the Atman. I go for refuge to that Supreme Brahman. So flee refuge to the source that's even beyond the causal. You see, A-U-M, A-U-M, waking, dreaming, deep sleep, then Svara beyond the 3 states. Beyond the deep sleep state is formlessness with a capital F. And here you're only getting formlessness with a small f. See? And it's got another stage to it. So the aim there, the method for Sananda is to transcend the gross and subtle objects and attain the bliss of refined ego. And when you do, then you get sasmita. The condition of that is accompanied by self-convergence, focused on I-ness and transcendent of the sattva guna. So I've often said it's like the refined ego is standing there looking down at or out at everything that it saw, all the way from the subtle to the gross worlds. But its back is still to the light of Brahman. So it turns one day and gives up its ego. So it's a very ripe ego, and it sees everything that it has, all the seeds. It's mastered everything, but it hasn't yet turned fully to the light. So the Trinity is sort of like that. After, billions of year cycles, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva will turn to Brahman and dissolve. 3 other souls will take that place for the next cycles. So the individual soul too will turn to the light and give up its own ego. It's a very rare move, and very difficult move, subtly difficult move to do in meditation. But when it does, then you've got the ripe ego dissolving into seedless state, because these are the seeded states, and it's not mentioning. Then it finally says asampragyata. That's how you get to asampragyata. But before we look at that, the aim of ego, of the ego samadhi, is to meditate on the united self as I am, in accordance with the highest cosmic principles. So that would again be Mahat. You see, I am that thou art, Tattvamasi, Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman. Those kinds of great sayings come from that level of recognition or realization. And the method would be to transcend the ego by unifying meditator, act of meditation, and object of meditation, because those were all here before, either as objects, gross, objects, subtle, or as deities, and so forth. So now you're coming to a place where you want to take that triputi and turn it into one thing. And if you're following the path of Jnanam, it would be the same. In the Gita, Krishna mentions that about knowledge, the act of knowing, and the knower all become one thing. Let's finish off this chart by giving you a taste of what asampragyata, what it's leading to. This is a condensation of what I pulled out of the Yoga Sutras of all of this. And point by point. First, the mind and gunas and nature are all present. And the mind wants to expand beyond them. It eliminates rajas, which is restlessness. The intellect discriminates between matter and self. Very important, back connected with crossing the transmigratory. I don't want to cycle anymore in material that my mind thinks up. You see, I want to be free of my own mind's projections. Then the early stages of Sampragyata Samadhi are encountered. We've looked at those. Then the final level of Sampragyata brings about Dharma Mega Samadhi. Buddhism also, and Patanjali both talk about Dharma Mega. It's called the rain cloud of virtues. So if you are along this path and you're not following the scriptures well and the teacher well, you'll get attracted by occult powers and you'll never get Dharma Mega Samadhi. And that happens to a lot of students and teachers, so-called teachers, that get attracted to domination and power and various things. You know, like I said last night, the guy up the street there at that ashram who's doing such questionable things to his students. So not that way, because that's the Vedanta Center where I learned. That's a great place. But basically, you don't have that desire for domination and petty powers and things like that. You want yogic powers, or the powers of God are different. The 8 occult powers are different than the 6 powers of the Godhead. And I have a chart where I put those side by side, so we're clear about that. So here it means Dharma Mega Samadhi is just a rain cloud of virtues. Virtues like compassion and selflessness and love of God and so forth. Those are available to you now if you will turn in the right direction. If their ego really ripens, it'll see those as valuable and the others as crow droppings by the side of the road. So I mean, that's how Sri Ramakrishna called them. Well, a person who attains the rain cloud of virtues, he gives up the cult powers like crow droppings by the side of the road. Then Chit Shakti illumines the buddhi. Now here's the only mention of Divine Mother in Patanjali's system, so we like it very much if we love Mother. Chit Shuddhi, so you know, purification of mind. The Chit Shakti, she comes and takes over. So if you've given up your ego, it's kind of like a short way of saying, if you've given up the ego, like, "Oh Mother, all happens by thy own sweet will," that song I just sang, then she'll come and take on your responsibility. So see what you had to go through in order to qualify yourself for grace, so it can descend upon you. And so that, as Sri Ramakrishna said, there's no fiber sticking out of the end of the thread, you know, when you go to pass it through the needle. It's really, especially if your eyesight isn't so good in the old age, that's very frustrating, you know. Lick, 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 it's just not happening, you see. So you want no fiber sticking out of the end of that thread so it can pass right through the eye of that needle. Because that's not a camel you have to worry about anymore. It's just a tiny thread that you want to put through there. So then the buddhi, so the mother illumines your intellect, is what it's saying there. Divine Mother comes and illumines your intellect, and it becomes stable and desireless. The next point, the gunas of Prakriti get duly dissolved back to their origin, about time. That happens very late in the game, and really impedes the process along the way, because you're attached to sattva here, you know, higher pleasure, higher bliss. And Patanjali says, you know, that's one of the 4 obstacles to your progress, to a sampragyata. That's why so few people probably ever have nirvana, nirvikalpa, a sampragyata, satori in Zen. You know, it's like rare. So you see what you have to do in order to bring it about, as it were. Then the Purusha now controls the mind and is free from samsara. So the mind gives, the ego, the mind component, all gives up, and the Purusha, which is the Purusha, the inner dwelling in the city, inner dweller of the city of 9 gates. That means, so you've got, you know, 9 apertures, and consciousness is coming out, you know, seeing the objects. Then you turn it back in, it sees the inner objects. And then you get bliss from that, knowing that there's a connection, because people don't know there's an inner and an outer. And when you take the inner and the outer and you turn it into one thing, you get bliss of it, and then your ego ripens, and you know, the whole shooting match's over. The game's over. Maya can't exert any influence on you anymore. And you feel free, and you breathe free, and you are free, as you always were free. I want everyone to be free as the air they breathe, when they asked Vivekananda what he wanted for us. Then, penultimately, attachment to matter ceases, but the buddhi still conducts relations between matter and spirit. Okay, well, here's where probably yoga has a slightly different end than Vedanta in Buddhism, than Advaita in Buddhism, I should say. You know, there's pretty much there's the burning of the canoe and the entering into a sampragata, but you see that's what yoga is headed forward to, seedlessness. But they provide for Jivan Mukta, because didn't Samkriti provide for Jivan Mukta here? You know, he said basically crosses transmigratory life, and the very first slokas we were reading there had that in it. Yeah. The son told him, I shall set forth a knowledge of reality so hard to come by which knowledge alone you will become liberated while living in the body. Very first thing he tells him. So it's not a transcendental, let's go away, you know, devil take the hindmost kind of philosophy. It provides for a penultimate stage where you can stay in the body. And so that would be the great souls who, as opposed to those who give up the body, videha, instead they have jivan mukta. They stay in the body to guide humanity. And so they're going to have some station where they look back on all this, where people are suffering or where people are striving. As I said at the beginning of the class, you'll see what rises to the top of this churning process in this cycle. You see how many thousands of souls will get free as billions continue to cycle on the wheel of samsara, never thinking about God even by accident. As Sri Ramakrishna said, they never think of God even by accident. All they want is money, money, money. Sound familiar? Then finally, the yogi interacts with the world, but the chit shakti within abides calmly despite all appearances. So, of course, we have Sri Ramakrishna to exemplify that for us. The mother took over everything in him, and he gave himself completely to her. So this is all about just this one sloka then, 21. The general non-attachment is non-involvement with objects, based on the perception that I am neither agent nor enjoyer. So you have to hold that perspective as you work your way through these seated samadhis, because you could fall out of the seated samadhis and backslide if you don't hold that kind of perspective, and also check in with the stages that you're moving along as a gauge. See, where am I today in the stages of evolution? What did I do today in my actions? Did I actually say I own that, or did I actually say I did that? Did I actually believe for a second when someone called me the devil that I was separate from God? Or was I steady in my convictions and with my foot set firmly on the path, as my teacher told me. So that's 21. Everything, be it pleasure or pain, is fashioned by prior deeds, or it's under the sway of the Lord. I do nothing with regard to it. So in that way, it's a matter of mind, you see. So let's move on so we get someplace to that. And I think to this. So if you're talking about someone who is aware of the stages of yoga, at least up to the stage 3, and is also practiced and is beginning to have samadhi of objects and samadhi of inner objects, so because we understand that fairly well now from just this brief 3 hours here with the Yoga Darshana in Vedic and yogic way of looking at it, then you're probably going to find that there's a higher counsel that you're taking resort to. As Shankara says in the scriptures, the practitioner of blissful dissolution joins the word with the mind the mind with the intellect with the ego with the witness, and the witness with Brahman. Brahman is the soul in everything. In this way he enjoys unalloyed peace and eternal bliss, right out of the Vivekachudamani. So that is the product or result of having practiced that. Beginning to have seated samadhi deep enough to where you've known the inner and the outer, you see, and you know yourself to be separate from them now. And you also know that they're your projection. I mean, a lot of people will know they're separate from them, but not many people will know that it's their own projection. That's what I've come to say. And so that would be an incomplete renunciation. If you simultaneously know that you're not those things, but that they were your projection, that's a more complete level of realization. That because otherwise you're, falling back on God did that, and, in the wrong way. God doesn't do anything really. His presence caused everything to do things. You have to stick around long enough in the Vedanta Darshana to understand that. The vegetables aren't dancing in the pot, by themselves, like the young boy thinks. See, look, mother, the vegetables are dancing. And she says, no, it's the water that's making them dance. The father comes in and says, no, my dear, it's not the water, it's the heat in the water that's making them dance. Grandmother comes in, no, it's not the heat in the water, it's the gas in the burner underneath the pot that's making them dance. The grandfather comes in and says, I work for the gas company. He knows there's a line going all the way out to the street, heading to a big reservoir of gas. So that's the real reason why things are dancing. But the reservoir of gas has almost nothing to do with the vegetables dancing in the water. It's just far distant. So you'd have to go through 5 levels of cause and effect to know what the real truth of the matter is about things moving. Things that seem animate, but which aren't. And so you wouldn't fall into the court of misfiance, philosophically speaking, where you'd start to attribute God with action. Like he moves or something. It moves. When it doesn't at all. It's all pervasive. It doesn't have to move. Its very presence causes things to move, but it doesn't move. So the finer and finer points of philosophy come by, to illumine your understanding, as they say in the scriptures. So we took a lot of time, and I knew we would in this class, on the yoga limbs with the yoga stages. And tomorrow we can look more deeply at this, but we can introduce it in the few minutes remaining to say that we are on Sloka 22, and you are being informed by a higher faction, and that's when the Shariran informs the Sharira. I dare you to say that 12 times in a row real fast. Shariran. And roll the R every time, like Sanskrit would. So the illumination of the jiva, how the witness informs the jiva, is how that's put. So I mean, we even in the remaining time, because you can look at this later after the break, after the class, that the Sardira is a body-mind mechanism. It's what you studied back here, right? It's the objects. The body's an object. The brain's an object. The objects of the senses are objects. The senses themselves are objects. So, that's the Sharira. The Shariran is the one that's the indwelling spirit in the body. So, what does the Sharira think? It creates mental vibrations via sankalpa. Vrittis via sankalpa. So, it likes to vibrate. Shake your booty. You see, it's doing that all the time. And but the Shariran wants you to calm the booty. You see, please don't let me see you dance again. I don't want to see you do that again. You see. So the witness is there. So he cognizes Atmic reality via non-fluctuation of the mind. So the Shariran is always quiet, calm, peaceful, as the stage told us it was. Silent. and quiescent. The next is that the Shira likes to obscure the connection between itself and the truth. So isn't that the sense of separation? See, I am the body, I'm not the Atman. See, and that's called the first evolute of Maya. See, I am the body is the first evolute of Maya, of the 16 evolutes of Maya. There are more, but that's the main one. So the Shariran will actually come forth to the mind and tell it that you should be affirming the Jiva's complete identity with the Atman. Jiva is Shiva. That's how my teacher used to say that from the podium. I can still hear his words and look at his picture over there on the mantelpiece and say, the Jiva is Shiva. See, Jivatman is Shiva, or Jivatman is the Paramatman, if you want to say it Vedantically. So there's no difference there. And you would know that if you separated the wheat from the chaff, so that you were none of the things you thought you were all this time. None of the things that your parents told you you were. None of the things that your schooling told you you were. None of the things that science told you that you were. None of the things that irreligion, in the form of religion, told you that you were. I'm none of those things. They never told me what I was, really. They didn't know themselves, so how could they? The silent, peaceful, quiescent, indivisible reality, inseparable from Brahman. So where did I ever hear that from anyone? And if I had have heard it, what if I have understood it, you see? So you have to hear it, Shruti, from someone. So somebody came over and jumped the ocean like Hanuman and told you. See? You better go tell those people. They're living in darkness. The Sharira tends ever towards disease, decay, and death. It thinks about those it broods on them. The Shariran, who is witnessing inside of it, acknowledges the indestructibility of the Atman. So it's totally different. One is, brooding on sense objects and decay and coming and going and, fears around it. And the Shariran's just sitting there, what are you talking about? All of this is unreal. All of this is a dream. And you're the dreamer. Wake up. Know yourself to be pure conscious awareness, timeless, deathless, birthless, spaceless, timeless, transcendent, blissful. So always, informing you. So this is how you see that he's got his hand by his ear here. You see, what's that? Huh? What's that you're saying? See. Listen inside. Might be a little foggy at first, but you'll hear it. And the Sharira tends ever toward, the Shariran gets attached to action in order to secure fruits. Isn't that pretty much everything we just studied in the wrong orientation? But the Shariran reveals the way of detachment to fruits and works. I'm not the doer, and I'm not the enjoyer. It's occurred several times in these slokas already. So it's always informing you of the right orientation to take. Because if you have that first, then you can realize it. If it's not there first, it doesn't occur to you. See? Maya is there if you don't know about it. As soon as you know about it, it flees. It's like your ignorance, right? So if you're letting it occupy your mind, brooding, and the one before that, then you're letting Maya in, like a camel in a tent at night, The Arab's out in the desert, all of a sudden he wakes up, 2 hours into his sleep, and the camel's got its nose in, you see. Nice and warm in there, cold outside. 2 hours later he wakes up again, and then it's got its whole head in. And finally he gets up and kicks the thing out, see, before it gets its whole body in. So you have to kind of be careful of that with these intrusions of Maya. You say, oh, it's not going to matter much, you see. Like I heard a mother tell me yesterday, their son told her, I'm a son of God and you're the devil. That's what kids are telling their mothers now. And then a kid walking up to her and says, I'm a man of God, but you're just the devil, because you go to a guru. That's what he told her. So these insinuations of Maya, you know, you have to
So much for the fifth commandment.
That's right. We have run out of time, haven't we? So that was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4 points we took off this chart. So we'll remember that for tomorrow morning. I hope you're all back here for it. We'll go through how the Shariran really informs the Sharira, and we'll look at the difference between the dissolved and crystallized mind as a result. You can see all wintry out here and nice spring out here. You see the new colorization of this chart, of these two charts. So you're seeing them for the first time. So these are all teachings of Lord Vashishta, which is another yoga that we've brought in today. There's Akshi Upanishad's 7 stages of yoga. There's Patanjali's 8 limbs of yoga. And now we're looking at Yoga Vashishta teachings, so how they all connect beautifully. So here then we should probably end then with our final slokas. Om Sato Ma Sadgamoya Tamaso Ma Joy Tirgamoya Mrichor Ma Amritam Gamoya Abira Mayeti Rudrayate Dakshinamukam Tenamam Pahinicham Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Lead us from darkness to light. Lead us from lower truth to higher truth. Lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from the illusion of death to eternal life. Reach us through and through, O Lord and Mother, with thy sweet and benign presence. Om, peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om.